Oh dear me, what a spicy morning we have had this morning. Who knew that the 90s themed Crawl Room could get Oasis back together, eh? But it's happened. It's happened. The morning of recording and the day of uploading for this video, Oasis have announced that they're doing quite a few tours and few gigs together, reunioning and, having that brotherly bust up all come to a head. And yeah, just fall back in love with each other again. Seemingly at the same time that Noel Gallagher's going to pay 50 million quid out on a divorce. But, that's just me being a silly conspiracy theorist, isn't it? So all those getting tickets on Saturday, good luck to you. I'm not bothering because I can't stand them. But, I just thought it was something to point out that I go 90s theme this year on an Oasis reunite for the first time in 15 years. Coincidence? I think not. Let's do the proper intro then, shall we? Hiya guys and welcome back to the Crawl Room. Back into this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula One. So the summer break has come to a close, and what could be said about that one? Well, it didn't really kick off very spectacularly, did it? We had some good races towards the end of the first half of the season. This one at Zandvoort was a little bit meh, wasn't it? There were some good overtakes up and down the field, but throughout the most part, it was just a one-stop race, and it was just very, very mundane. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out a maximum of 10 points based on their overall race weekend's performance, and I can go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Take a look out for bonus points though. They're sometimes enough for some drivers to do something extra special during a race. On the very rare occasion I do award minus points those drivers to do something extra special, but for all the wrong reasons. Let's take a look at the current Crawl Room standings then going into this episode, shall we? It's on the screen now for you to take a look at. Have a look and see where your favourite driver currently is, and based on this race weekend's performance, can you see them going up? Can you see them going down? There's a lot to play for. It's all still very tight at the top, and it's also very lonely down at the bottom there. Will there be any new drivers joining the disqualified pile? Logan Sargent and Checo Perez already out of here, but could any more be added to that list after this episode? So without further ado, shall we kick things off with the race winner then? I think we shall. It is Lando Norris in that mighty McLaren. I've already got bloody hat head. Well, I've been wearing it about 30 seconds. Yes, Lando Norris is victorious this race. Got pole position and won the race, but he had a bit of a bogged down start, didn't he? Max Verstappen got the better launch. And Max held him off for about 18 laps, which was quite impressive, really, before the inevitable happened, and that much quicker McLaren now swooped by him, and was able to take the lead. He pulled out around a 4.5 second gap before the first round of pit stops, so if Max did the undercut, they could still cover him off at the next stop, which is exactly what happened. And then from there, he just built a gap, and got 22.8 seconds ahead of him at the flag. Lando Norris this weekend, there's not really much more to say about his race other than it was very, very respectable, but he did have the most dominant car this race weekend, without a shadow of a doubt, and yes, he put it on pole, and yes, he won the race, but he had that slow start, and it took him 18 laps to find a way around Max Verstappen. Yeah, you could say he was just biding his time, he knew he had the pace, that's fine, I get that, totally get that. But it's just frustrating again to see a weekend where McLaren have got the perfect car, Lando doesn't deliver a perfect weekend, and that's what he needs to do. Yeah, he got fastest lap, he took the maximum points out of it, but we need to see him just start from pole and dominate a race like we did with Max. Max's Red Bull now is the second or third quickest car. He can't go winning the races like he could now. McLaren clearly got that advantage, but for the first 18 laps, for some reason, he was stuck behind Max. So for that reason, it might be harsh, but it's 7.5 from me. I do rate Lando. I love Lando as a driver. I think he's a great personality on the grid, and I'm not giving him any disrespect to the point I hate him, but it's just frustrating when you see that he still gets a poor start and you think, well, that could have just compromised his whole race. It could have been poor start and then got contact. He doesn't need that. Just launch off the line like you can do, like we know you can do. Launch off the line, lead it and bloody win it. That's all he needs to do. So it's 7.5 for me for Lando Norris for what has been a great weekend for McLaren. but just a slightly above average race in the end for Lando Norris because he couldn't get it off the line and took so long to get round Max. In second place, we come to Max Verstappen in the mighty Red Bull. Since its return to Zandvoort, all Max Verstappen has done is win his home Grand Prix. But this time around, unfortunately, he wasn't able to convert a victory today. P2 on the grid, P2 in the race. He did a good job there. That was the best he could have done. Already mentioned, better start than Lando. Got ahead of him, stayed ahead of him for 18 laps, and then his tyres were going away a lot quicker than the McLaren. It's crazy to think of a Red Bull chewing its tyres, isn't it? But clearly something on that car has been upgraded and it's not worked out for the better. Yeah, you know, it's difficult, isn't it, to judge Max because we're just so used to him being the dominant force now. We know that Red Bull's not really that quick, to be honest now. We know it's not the quickest. It's not been the quickest for a while, but it's always been marginal. Whereas this is the first race I feel we've truly seen the representation of how good that McLaren has been for a number of races. It's just that the McLaren drivers or the McLaren strategy have bottled it up a few times, which is what I keep saying. You know, there should be a lot more wins for McLaren and for Lando this season already, but this time around it's actually come together and we could see the true pace of that McLaren against that Red Bull. Max did a great job, P2 on the grid, P2 in the race. He led the race for the first 18 laps to give someone something to cheer for in the crowd of Dutch fans, of course, and it's 9 points from me. 9 points to Max Verstappen. Great effort, great job, deserves that position there. I think he deserves 9. He got the most out of the car he could. Still finished ahead of another McLaren as well that we'll come to in a moment. But yeah, P2 is definitely the best he could have done on the day today. 9 to Max Verstappen. Securing third place, we come to Sha-la-la. Oh, sacre bleu, sha-la-la. Podium. When you think, well, has he got the third quickest car? I would maybe say so, yes, but at the same time, no. It's a difficult one to judge where that Ferrari pace is right now. Some days it's the 5th fastest, some days it's the 3rd, some days it was difficult to judge, like here in Holland today. I think Leclerc pulled out a mighty effort, to be honest, to deliver what he could today and to deliver a podium position, because that was a great effort. You can't take that away from him. He's really done well. P3, great effort. It's a perfect 10 from me. There's not really much to say about it because it was fairly faultless this weekend. He drove a great job. It was quicker than Sainz all weekend, although Sainz seemed to have found his form on Sunday, but Saturday was a difficult one. But for Charles Leclerc, it was a solid qualifying, got himself into a strong, good position, got himself up the order, good strategy. They had a couple of cars that decided to do a double pit stop. There was like the likes of Russell decided to try a 2-stop, which just gave him that bit more of a cushion as well. And overall, it was a great weekend by Charles Leclerc, and it's a perfect 10 from me. I cannot fault a thing by Charles this weekend. One of my drivers of the weekend really delivered the most he could in a Ferrari that is at best third fastest, but he still managed to finish ahead of another McLaren and a Red Bull. You know, he came under pressure from Piastri, held it off well. Fantastic effort. A perfect 10 for me. For Cha-la-la. 4th place, we come to Oscar Pastry. What's your favourite pastry? Well, he's not my favourite pastry today, unfortunately. That was difficult, wasn't it? A P4 finish with a car that looked very dominant indeed in the hands of Lando, and I've still criticised Lando. So, I'm definitely going to be criticising Oscar Pastry this weekend, unfortunately. P3 on the grid, should have been a 1-2 start, and in the race, P4 finish. Should have been on the podium as an absolute minimum. He should have found his way around Charles, and even then, with the pace of that McLaren, he should have been ahead of Max as well. So a very frustrating weekend for Oscar Piastri. Left a podium on the table there, absolutely, and potentially left a P2 on the table as well. It's going to be a middle of row 5 from me for him, and that's as good as it's going to get. He's probably generous he's got that, to be honest. It was a difficult race overall. I've criticised Lando, as I've already mentioned. Oscar, unfortunately, does need criticising for that because a car that should be on the podium isn't on the podium, couldn't find his way around a much slower Ferrari, and we know it's a much slower Ferrari, and yeah, was ultimately just missing out on a podium spot. It's good points for McLaren. The close gap to 30 points in the Constructors now, but Had Oscar been P2 instead of P4, we could have taken another 6 off that tally as well. So yeah, Oscar doing a great job, still doing better than Ricciardo. I still hold that and I still maintain that. But a tough weekend for Oscar Piastri to see his teammate win in such a dominant fashion and him stuck in the dirty air of a Ferrari, unable to get round into the podium places. Middle row 5 to Oscar Piastri. In 5th place, we come to Carlos Sainz, smooth operator. Not really, I'm afraid. That Saturday was difficult, wasn't it? On the fringes of getting knocked out in Q1, and then when Q2 came around, you just knew he wasn't going to get through into Q3 because that pace of that car just did not seem right at all, did it? He just sent scruffy. It was just slow. It wasn't like he was doing any major mistakes. It was just looking like a bit of a pig. You know, he couldn't take the corner speed entry into the corners. It just looked a bit mundane, a bit mellow. But yeah, here he is in the end after qualifying P11, elevated to P10 with the disqualification for Alex Albon, of course. Yeah, he ends up finishing here in P5, which I think is a great recovery. And he manages to finish ahead of Checo Perez, which is no difficulty anyway. But there was the likes of the Aston Martins he had to get through as well, that had decent pace and respectable pace at the start, but sort of faded away. But yeah, you know, he gets here into P5. I think that's a good recovery from what was a difficult qualifying. Still not sure what happened in qualifying there. But yeah, ultimately Carlos Sainz can't get as good as his teammate, can he? And he's going to be a solid 7 from me. Maybe generous by a point, to be honest. But I do feel the recovery into P5 in a Ferrari that's not the best, I think it's worth commending. It was just a difficult Saturday that he had that knocks him a few points off for me. There certainly wasn't room for 2 Ferraris on the podium this weekend, that's for sure. But if Leclerc was P3, Sainz could have been P3 had he had a bit of qualifying instead. So he sort of maybe cost himself a podium, but in the end I don't think Ferrari were going to get anything better out of this weekend. It would have just been nice to see Carlos Sainz a bit further up there, because maybe he could have been here ahead of Piastri, maybe he could have been fighting for the podium, maybe they could have double stacked the Ferraris or done a different strategy with each of them and tripped Max Verstappen up. There was possibilities there, weren't there? So yeah, Carlos Sainz, a great recovery drive after a difficult Saturday. A solid 7 to him. Next up, we come to Checo. Sergio Perez finishing P6 in the Red Bull, long disqualified on this series and will remain that way, so we won't talk much about him. But it was good to see him get into Q3 and good to see him score some respectable points with a P6 finish. Yeah, I'm not really going to sing his praises over that, but at least he wasn't out in Q1 and not getting any points. I think that's the best Red Bull can hope for at the moment, isn't it? So yeah, Checo disqualified anyway, remains that way. But yeah, it was an okay drive from him, I suppose, in what is the second, third best car now. Either way, it should have been more, it wasn't, and Checo finishes P6. Hooray, it's points. Securing P7, we come to George of the Russell. Watch out for that 2-stop. Yeah, the 2-stop strategy did not work for Mercedes or George of the Russell this time around, unfortunately for him. The first stop was great, though. That was what was frustrating about it. He was third off the line. He did a great job there. Unfortunately, they got undercut by Checo. He was doing a great job running around in P3, but then unfortunately they got undercut by Leclerc in the Ferrari. That dropped into P4. Then later on in the race, Piastri had pitted and come out P5. Much fresher tyres got round him to P5, obviously into P4. George Russell down to P5. He probably could have stayed there, but instead they went for the pit stop, and it didn't go well, did it? They went for the second stop, and it didn't work out, and here he is down here in the fringes of just picking up a few points, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't think George did a bad weekend this weekend, though. He out-qualified Hamilton, out-raced Hamilton. Even when he did a 2-stop strategy, he still kicked out ahead, which is ultimately a fantastic effort. But unfortunately, he tumbles behind the likes of Carlos Sainz and Checo Perez when he really didn't need to, did he? He didn't need to lose those places with that 2-stop, but they were hoping the fresher tyre deficit would pay dividends and he would climb his way back through those places, but he didn't, so it was more of a loss than a gain. So in theory, you know, it was the Mercedes strategy that threw away a 5th place finish for George Russell this weekend, and I think that was a great effort with the car he had after a great start. the strategy as well, reacting to Ferrari instead of being proactive at the first round of stops. Leclerc obviously nipping through as well. So I don't really think there's much else George Russell could do. He only really lost out on merit on track to Oscar Piastri with an overtake. So he didn't do anything really wrong this weekend. So it's going to be a solid 8 from me for George Russell. I think that was a good effort. Best he could have done. Unfortunately, the strategy didn't work out well at all. Lost places throughout the race due to poor decision making on the pit wall. The 2-stop really wasn't the right option. So a P4 really, you could say, went missing total this weekend, but P5 was more realistic. So to only come away with a P7, bit of a shame. 8 to Georgia the Russell. Next up, in 8th place, we come to Lewis Hamilton in the second of the Mercedes, just behind his teammate. You think, well, that's obviously the pace of that car this weekend. Well, it wasn't, unfortunately. Lewis Hamilton out in Q2, was dropped down to P12, obviously knocked out in Q2. Then had a 3-place grid drop, so was 15th. Then Alex Albon got disqualified, so elevated back to 14th again. He was able to get past and into the points, but again it was quite late on in the race that he finally managed to do that. He started on the soft tyre instead of the medium, so you'd have thought with that tyre deficit he could have made some advantage. Complaining to slow down the straights, took him forever to overtake Hulkenberg, and then that was that really. He finally got through on Nico Hulkenberg and then was able to make his way around Pierre Gasly as well, I believe it was. Came in for his stop in the early 20s laps, put the hard tyres on and stayed out there for the remainder of the race. Finishing here in PA, it's some points, but it should have been a lot more, really. Look at where George could have been. Again, if both Mercedes had been up there, if both Ferraris could have been up there, maybe they could have done a different strategy with each car, tried to attack the cars in a strategic way, in a strategic gamble, rather than just doing George the 2-stop and hoping for the best, which didn't work out. They could have left Hamilton out there maybe to slow the cars down, etc. There could have been a game to be played, but as it was just a recovery drive for Lewis Hamilton this weekend, and unfortunately P8 was the best he could muster, which isn't fantastic, is it? So it's going to be 5.5 from me for Lewis Hamilton. A shame to see him down here, and a shame to see him have a difficult qualifying and getting the penalty for the impeding, because I've been singing his praises for the last 2-3 races before the summer break, but this time now it seems like we've gone back into that Hamilton slump again that we saw at the start of the year. Not able to pick up much, difficult qualifyings, difficult races. And the only reason he's 1 place behind his teammate rather than 3 or 4 places behind is purely down to strategy. So that's a shame. That is a shame. 5.5 to Lewis Hamilton. 9th place, we come to Pierre Gasly in that Alpine. What a fantastic weekend Pierre Gasly has had into Q3. Great effort there. Stunning effort to get that Alpine into Q3. And in the race itself, had the pace to be running around inside the points throughout most of it. Only when the strategy came into play, he dropped out of the points. But you could always see that he was the lead runner of those stoppers. He went for obviously the more normal tyre strategy of pitting at the right time. There was a lot of the lower teams went for the undercut and tried to get the track position, which initially worked out right for the likes of Albon, Hulkenberg. Kevin Magnussen stayed out there a lot longer than he should have done on his hard tyres to try and hold those cars up behind the likes of Gasly and Alonso and Stroll, to try and hold off obviously for him catching Hulkenberg. But as it was, Gasly managed to side his way past Kevin Magnussen. That was a mad moment, that, wasn't it? Like 4 wide, everyone just overtaking Magnussen, the only car without DRS. He then got past Alex Albon on the fading tyre compound that he was on, and then was elevated into the points, managed to get Nico Hulkenberg for 9th, and then that's where he stayed. So a great effort, especially a great effort to finish ahead of 2 Aston Martins as well, who were originally ahead of him in the race. But yeah, one of my drivers of the weekend, to be honest. For me personally, if I had to give it between Charles and Gasly, I would give it Pierre, because he really showed his teammate up this weekend and he really delivered a cracking result. P9 when there was no retirements either, let's not forget that. So, your top 5 teams are sort of locked in, aren't they, with the likes of, your 2 Aston Martins, your 2 Mercedes, your 2 Ferraris, your 2 Red Bulls, your 2 McLarens. That should be your top 10. So the fact that Gasly was able to snatch not 1 point but 2 points away and have great pace in that Alpine really says a lot. So it's a perfect 10 from me for Pierre Gasly. It can be no less than that, can it? What a great weekend. Q3 appearance, great pace in the race, some great overtakes to get through the field that had tried the undercut and were on much older tyres. He just drove a really smart, clean race, and was able to get the best result possible for that Alpine squad. A perfect 10 to Pierre Gasly. And last of the point scorers, we come to Fernando Alonso in that Aston Martin, just picking up 1 point here. That's disappointing because they look to have good pace in qualifying. That, you know, they were lined up 7th and 8th, and you thought, well, yeah, you know, that's probably where they're going to finish. But if they can stay there and something happens ahead, they could be on for a good top 5. But as it was, the strategic gamble really didn't pay off. The Aston Martins weren't able to get through the traffic as well as Pierre Gasly was able to do so that cost him a little bit of time. And Alonso, with just a few laps remaining, got round Hülkenberg for that final points-paying position. There was a massive tyre deficit there as well, of course, but the fact it took him so long to catch up to Hülkenberg and then so long to overtake him, yeah, it did happen ultimately, and he did pick up a point. It's a shame that he finished behind an Alpine of Gasly. Unfortunate for them this weekend, there just wasn't really much else. The qualifying pace was good, the race pace wasn't fantastic. But Alonso, where would I have put him really? When you look at the race pace, it'd have been nice to see him 8th, because obviously Hamilton had a struggling race really. And as mentioned, you know, managed to pick up a few lucky points here and there, but it wasn't mightily impressive. So I think 8th was possibly the best that the Aston Martin squad could have done. Come away with a 10th and just 1 point. It's a little bit disappointing, especially finishing behind an Alpine. But Alonso really didn't do anything wrong, and I think he drove really smart, to be honest with you. I think he had some clever moves, drove well. He's sort of like got his fire in his belly a little bit more now after his reset after the summer break, which is encouraging. So for Alonso, it's 8 points from me. I think that's a fair score, a fair assessment of his drive, based on him finishing behind an Alpine and maybe Hamilton that he should have finished ahead of as well. But again, strategy came into play. The Aston Martin didn't look to have the pace in the race that it did in qualifying. And just another tough day at the office for Aston Martin. 1 point, but they'd have been hoping for more, but at least they got something. 8 to Fernando Alonso. Securing 11th place and just missing out on the points again. It's Nico Hülkenberg. Oh, I needed that. Nico Hülkenberg once again waving and flying the flag for Haas. Qualifying was a little bit more tricky though, wasn't it? Only P14 in the end. The Haas didn't really look to be able to do much better than that, because I think they're only 14th and 15th anyway at the end of Q1, so we're lucky not to get eliminated into Q1. As it was, with penalties and disqualifications ahead, Nico Hülkenberg lined himself up in P12, had a great start to nab a position away, and got himself up into P11. That's where he ran for the most of the race and then went for the undercut strategy. So Alex was the first one to try this, and then of course Haas followed suit along with Yuki Tsunoda in the RB as well, wasn't it? So yeah, they came in like lap 14, lap 15, something around that window, popped the hard tyres on and then just went to the end of the race. Initially it looked to have played off quite well because they left Kevin Magnussen out there, who started on the hard tyres. They left him out there, so they were 9th and 10th at one point. Hülkenberg 9th, Magnussen 10th, was holding up Gasly, and they got like a 10-second window to Gasly, and then a further 4 seconds back was Alonso or something like that. So you think, well, at least they've got some laps to do something now. You know, Kevin Magnussen used once again as the barrier, the buffer, which is fair enough if it worked. Unfortunately, this time around, it didn't quite work out, did it? And Gasly was able to hunt him down. There was one moment, I think it must have been blue flags, because there was one lap in particular where Hülkenberg was like 5 seconds ahead, and then you looked again, it was 3 seconds, and a lap had only passed by. So maybe Hülkenberg having to get out the way for blue flags meant that Gasly was able to gain some massive advantage on pace there. And then from there, closed him up, overtook him, and then Alonso closed him up and overtook him as well. So finishing here, P11. Best he could have done, really, I think, with the strategy given. Maybe that Haas did have pace to secure a point this weekend, especially seeing where Alpine ended up. But the strategy that at Hulkenberg was ultimately put on meant that he was fighting a losing battle. Unfortunately, it meant for Nico Hulkenberg, the strategy was placed on, meant that he was fighting for the points, but when the tyre deficit came into play, unfortunately, he didn't have any answer for the quicker cars coming through. To finish P11 is still very respectable, though. So for Nico Hulkenberg this weekend, it's going to be 8.5 from me. Could have done with seeing him a little bit better in qualifying, but again, the penalties ahead obviously put him about 12th, which is where I think he should have started. But obviously, if he'd have qualified 12th, he could have maybe got there up into like P10 then. And then maybe there was a bit more strategic game they could have played further up the field. Ultimately, though, Hulkenberg could do nothing wrong. It's another P11 finish, which is such a shame. I think that's the 6th time now for him this year, which is just frustrating. But when every car finishes 11th for a Haas is respectable. 8.5 to Nico Hulkenberg. Finishing in 12th place, we come to Daniel Ricciardo in the first of the Visa Cash App Maxi Tampon Buy One Get One Free. Don't forget your Alpha Tauri, Toro Rosso, Minardi. There you go, we got it all in. Yeah, Ricciardo this weekend out in Q1, very, very poor, and then only ahead of his teammate because they decided to two-stop his teammate. And he was a late one-stopper, so he got ahead of the cars that early one-stopped. That's about it, really. Middle row 5 from me for Daniel Ricciardo. Once again, RB trying to make him look better than he is. Finishing here in P12, you think, yeah, that's respectable. And then you look at the context of why his teammates further down the field. You look at the context as to why other cars are further down the field as well, being on much older tyres towards the end of the race. It was basically strategy that put him here and not his own race pace. So, yeah, it can be positive and, yeah, I think we had a good race and all this bullshit, but ultimately Daniel Ricciardo, get out of the seat, give Liam Lawson a go, and yeah, just annoying again. 5 to Ricciardo, and he's thankful for him. Securing and unlucky for some P13, we come to Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin.
Hey, 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 you've been disqualified, you bastard.
And there we have it. He was on a final warning anyway, but disqualification has come his way. He's not really done anything wrong this weekend. I just think he'd outstayed his welcome. Yeah, to be fair, I have been very harsh with this, but I just thought, no, get rid. I've had enough of him now. Was good in qualifying, actually, and didn't get his Q3 lap time together at all, because I think he could have been faster than Alonso in qualifying. Q1 and Q2 definitely showed that, but when it mattered, he bottled it. And then in the race itself, was unable to get past the cars and older tyres. That's why he's down here in 13th, and his teammate picked up a point. Realistically, Aston Martin were hoping for 9th and 10th this weekend at best, judging by that race pace. And it didn't happen, did it? It didn't happen. So, yeah, Lance Stroll, probably harsh that he got disqualified right now. I don't think many people are expecting it, but he's had a good run. He's had 15 races where I've, given him chances after chances after chances, and he's probably slipped under the net a couple of times in that time as well. So, yeah, he's had 5 of them already. He can't have any more warnings, and that's it. He's out of here. So, yeah, Lance Stroll. Disqualified on the Krull Room. Didn't really do anything wrong this weekend, but I've just had enough of him. 14th place, we come to Alex Albon in the first of the Williams. What a shame for Alex. P8 in qualifying, great effort, but then the floor was just ever so slightly wide. They'd not filed or sanded a little bit of the rear floor down in a certain section, meaning it was a fraction of a millimetre over the prescribed limit of how wide a rear floor can be. So that's it, I'm afraid. Technical regulations cannot be broken, cannot be bent, there can't be any grey areas, and he had to start at the back of the grid, which ended up being a P19 finish due to Kevin Magnussen's pit lane start. But yeah, P19... got himself into around the likes of about P16, P15, went for the early stop strategy, which was very, very early indeed, went onto the hard tyres, managed to elevate himself up into 10th place at that scenario, and was just hanging on to the fringes of the points briefly, but then the quicker cars came through on much faster, much newer, much fresher tyres, and just swept around him, dropped to around P14. They then decided to pit Alex again for a 2-stop, which made sense at that point. They'd already lost the points-paying position that they were trying to cling on for. Dropped into around 17th, and here he is elevated to 14th in the end, getting past some cars again that did that same strategy that Alex started, which was the old our tyres to the end. So yeah, Alex Albon this weekend, it's a solid 7 from me. I think he had a great qualifying effort. It would have been really interesting to see how the strategy would have played out. Had he stayed up there, would they have still gone for the early cut? The early stop and try and just maintain track position, or would they have followed a more casual and normal stance of like, let the others get on with it, our race will come? Alex seemed to show the pace after he'd done the second stop, that he was able to overtake cars, which was encouraging. But yeah, unfortunately it's another missed opportunity for Williams to secure a good couple of points there. They look to have the measure of the Alpine team, they look to be on pace with those. Gasly finished P9, so P10 at very worst I think was possible this weekend for Alex, and another point would have been very handy for their championship tally. But as it was, a team error, strategic team error unfortunately, and meant that it was just very much a recovery game from there. And Alex did a solid job in doing so with the strategy given. A solid 7 to Alex Albon. 15th place, we come to the second of the Alpines in Esti Bestie, oh God, Esti Bestie to you. Ain't like Esti Bestie Ocon.
I can't believe I made this list. I only competed in 2 races in the 90s, but I'm Dutch and I'm not called Jos, so that's why the moaning Yorkshireman chose me.
And there we have it, Jan Lammers of the week to Esti Bestie Ocon. Somewhat everyone's going to be saying, why isn't it the other Dutch driver that we all know raced in the 90s? Well, because he's a fucking scumbag and I wouldn't represent him on this Cruel Room. So yeah, that's that. Enough said. You know what I'm talking about as well. And yes, he has got a son in Formula One currently. But yeah, I'm never gonna put him on this series because he's an absolute knob. But yeah, Jan Lammers of the week to Esti Bestie Ocon, massively outperformed by Gasly this weekend. Gasly into Q3 and into the points. I mean, Esti Bestie Ocon out in Q1. It's a mystery, guys. I don't know what happened. And then in the race, pure lack of pace. And only here finishing 15th place, which is still a very disappointing position. Nowhere near the points. So it's short and sweet for Esti Bestie Ocon, unfortunately for him. It is an of the week to him. Very, very poor weekend. In a weekend where Alpine looked to have pace performance. Maybe, just maybe, had he got into Q3, it could have been a P9, P10 finish, as we've seen earlier in the season from the Alpine squad. But we're never going to know, because Ocon ruined his chances by getting eliminated into Q1 and then not making any pace in the race either. And here in 15th is a very, very lonely place to finish. It is Jan Lammers of the week to Esti Bestie Ocon. Then we come to Logan Sargent in the second of the Williams. Disqualified anyway on the Cruel Room, so we don't really talk much about him. But my oh my oh my, he's had a big shunt again, hasn't he? Big smelly mess in free practice 3. Wasn't able to get out for qualifying, understandably so, because he set the car alight. He crashed that hard. And yeah, there's talks of replacing him already now. Apparently Williams are in talks with Red Bull and RB, or Visa Cash App Maxi Tampon, whatever you want to call them, to get Liam Lawson in that car for the remainder of the season. So let's see how quickly that happens. But yeah, he needs to go, doesn't he? He needs to go. I mean, we already know he's not in Formula One next year. And the fact he's still like this and still trying hard as if somehow he can save his career, it's just not acceptable, is it? So yeah, big damage to Logan Sargent's car, unfortunately. The race itself did absolutely nothing. And yeah, oh well, he managed to finish ahead of a couple of cars, which is fair enough. But damage very much done in practice, quite literally. So yeah, Logan Sargent disqualified anyway. And this weekend was yet another weekend to represent why he's already there. Next up, we come to Yuki Tsunoda in the second of the Visa Cash App Maxi Tampon Buy One Get One Frees. Don't forget your AlphaTauri, your Toro Rosso, your Minardi. Yes, unfortunately for Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, shafted by the strategy, a bit like George Russell really. Looks worse than it was. He should have been there finishing around where Daniel Ricciardo finished, but instead they went for the two-stop strategy. That didn't work out. Got involved in a broil with Logan Sargent and Kevin Magnussen towards the end. Had to get out of the way for 4 blue flags quite often as well, which hindered his progress because he was obviously lower down the field then and was getting blue flags more often. So here he is finishing 16th. It certainly wasn't a fantastic weekend by Yuki Tsunoda, but he certainly deserves praising for beating his teammate in qualifying and was beating him in the race until they decided to go for that two-stop strategy. I wonder why. Yeah, that's right, because we want to try and make Ricciardo look as good as possible. So yeah, for Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, it's a solid 6 from me. I think he did a great job in qualifying, getting himself into Q2, good effort, and then in the race itself, unfortunately, he was screwed by the strategy when he could have been finishing around 12th or 13th, but there wasn't much more coming from it, unfortunately. Points weren't possible for RB this weekend, so then it was just damage limitation just to make sure that Ricciardo looked better. That's all that's about. So yeah, Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, solid effort, a solid 6 to him. Next up, we come to Kevin Magnussen in the second of the Haasers, down here in 18th. Again, doesn't really tell the true story or the true picture for Kevin Magnussen's weekend this weekend. Qualified himself in 15th. Again, nothing really overly spectacular by the Haasers in qualifying, but they were lucky, I think, for both cars to get through into Q2 because the pace didn't look to be there over a single lap. So P15, he lined up behind his teammate. With all the penalties ahead and everything, then they would have started 12th and 13th. However, they had to do a battery change overnight on Kevin Magnussen's car, so that meant, unfortunately for him, he broke the curfew and had to start in the pit lane. So yeah, it was a non-changeable part between sessions, so that meant that it was a pit lane start for him. So pit lane start he did do, and we did see a minor off for him in the early laps on lap 1, just bouncing through the gravel at turn 1. He was already last anyway at that point. Obviously he just caught up to the back of the pack, got a little bit keen on the brakes and ran wide. Caught back up to the back of the pack, and then it was just a case of, right, we need to use Kevin as a bit of a buffer to try and get Hülkenberg the gap again, like we saw in Saudi, but not as dramatic. He was trying to hold the likes of Gasly behind, the 2 Aston Martins, and there was even like Tsunoda in there at one point as well. So yeah, they were trying to hold that gaggle back so that it gave Hülkenberg the best possible chance of maintaining that P9 finish and certainly trying to stay within the points. Kevin Magnussen, though, when it came down to that long straight, he was the only car without DRS and all the others just breezed past him, and then from there he pulled into the pits, tumbled down obviously to the back of the pack and was able to recover here to just a solitary position well down here in P17, but yeah, there wasn't much else he could do. So it wasn't a great weekend by Magnussen, but it wasn't all his fault. He's 4.5 from me, below average. It was a shame he had that battery issue, of course, that had to affect his race totally, but did a good defensive job at the end there, but it just didn't quite work out, and that was his sole job this weekend, to try and keep Hülkenberg in the points. It would have been nice, any extra laps, I think maybe additional 2 laps if Kevin Magnussen could have kept Alonso behind, would have been enough to see the gap be big enough for Hülkenberg to secure a solitary point, but as it was, that's life. He got DRS'd down the straight, and it's 4.5 to Kevin Magnussen. Then we come to Valtteri Bottas in the first of the state kick me up the arse Saubers. 19th position, eh? 19th, wow. Yeah, Valtteri, I mean, it's middle of 5 from me, and I can't do any better than that, unfortunately. I mean, the car pace was poor out in Q1, but did qualify under a couple of cars, I think he did, didn't he? And then the race itself, I mean, he was running around about 15th, and then they decided to go for another stop again, just to make sure he definitely stayed 19th and down at the back, like they deliberately don't want to score any points or deliberately want to do anything exciting. Yeah, Bottas, I really do think that was the worst car this weekend on the grid, without doubt, and it was very difficult to judge Bottas's race because it was just one of those, wasn't it? So yeah, Valtteri Bottas, middle row 5 from him, and yeah, very, very difficult day at the office for State Kick Me Up the Arse Sauber, and in particular Valtteri Bottas. And last but by no means least, in 20th place and last of the runners, we come to Zhou Guan Yu in the second of the State Kick Me Up the Arse Saubers.
I hold the record for the longest hiatus within Formula 1. A whole 10 years went by before I returned to Formula 1 in 1992. I just need to make sure Mika Häkkinen doesn't decide to return, and that record should be mine forever. Hurrah!
And there we have it, Jan Lammers of the week to Zhou Guanyu, and with that comes the final warning to him. Any more lacklustre performances and he will be joining the likes of Sergio Perez, Logan Sargent and now the newly appointed Lance Stroll in the disqualified pile. So yes, Zhou Guanyu, a very, very disappointing and very poor race weekend this weekend. Yes, his teammate Valtteri Bottas may have finished in 19th place, and maybe, just maybe, 19th and 20th was the best that all of the stake kick me up the arse Saubers could have done this race. However, Zhou Guanyu was almost a second off his teammate in qualifying, and in the race ended up about 20 odd seconds behind him as well. So it was a very, very poor and lacklustre performance by Zhou Guanyu, miles away from his teammate, and even his teammate lined up second to last on this list. So yes, if Bottas's race was disappointing, Zhou Guanyu's was certainly of the week worthy with that massive disappointment. We don't expect anything from him anymore, do we? Let's be honest, it has been a very, very tough season by Zhou Guanyu standards, and it's only the fact that the standard of Formula 1 has been so low this season as to why he's only just on a final warning now and not already in the disqualified pile. He has dodged so many bullets this season and I can't be having it anymore. So yes, Zhou Guanyu, it is a of the week to him, and with it a final warning. That's his fifth and final warning. Any more of that and he's out of here. Of the week to Zhou Guanyu. So everything, guys, those were the runners and riders of the Dutch Grand Prix. Let me know in the comments section down below. Did I score any drivers too high, any too low? So let's take a look at the updated standings then, with the scores I have just awarded. They are on the screen now for you to take a look at. Now have a look and see where your favourite driver is. We still have Shalala at the top. Nico Hülkenberg snatching his way back up into second place. So that's a decent effort by him. And it's all fairly stable at the moment. A few mixes and muddlers up at lower down the field and mid-pack. But it's all very, very tight and still very much to play with. 9 rounds left to go in real life and also in the Cruel Room Championship as well. Take a look at the Constructors' standings as well. Those are on the screen for you. I've not mixed or muddled up any of those just yet. Those minus points will be coming off at the end of the season. So, yeah, there's not much to do on there at the moment. But take into note the minus points at the side, because all that will get sorted out at the end. And we will crown our team champion as well at the end of 2024. A massive thanks as always goes out to Dan, formerly of Mushy Gaming, of course, currently running under his own name, Dan Bartlett, for providing me with the scoreboard that you see on your screen, for the driver icons you see in the corner of your screen, and for the intro as well at the start. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. And who can forget Mr. Dave, F1 Games PlayStation, for providing me with the of the weeks that you don't necessarily know who they're going to be, but you know you're going to love them. I really look forward to speaking to you all in the comments, so let me know as always down below what you thought of the race. Let me know everything about it. Let me know your opinions on each driver, etc, etc, like you already do anyway. So that's it from me. I'll see you all in a couple of weeks time for the Italian Grand Prix, I believe it is, isn't it, from Monza? Is that the next one? I'm sure it's on the card soon anyway, so yeah, I'll see you all then. And yeah, as always, yeah, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this race and what you think going into the remainder of the season. So singing you out is Liam Gallagher with their famous song, Don't Look Back in Anger. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, much love. So Sally can wait, she knows it's too late as we're walking on by. Her soul slides away, but don't look back in anger, I heard you say. At least not today. Tee